decibels correctly this time.
That's what I like to hear.
Okay, we live? Looks like it.
Life.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen on September 7th, 2021. We always start with our call to order, so Candace, please.
Candace Bouchard.
Todd Archelashi.
Melissa Bird.
Josh Kelly.
Candy Perez.
Sheila Sedlak.
Jack Bork.
Stephen Sedlak.
Linda Bravo.
Would you please join us for a pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there anything under agenda review from anybody? If not, may I have a motion to approve our regular minutes of August 16th?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll
Thank you, Todd. Any updates for Sheila? Seeing none, all in favor? And any abstentions? Okay. Next up is, we have two rounds of this, but this is citizens' comments. Board of Selectmen welcomes public comments. You have 3 minutes or less, and you may speak once during this round, and please give your name and address. Anyone? If you would, come up to the microphone, and you can stand or sit, whatever you're more comfortable doing.
Well, maybe
It's Bill, right?
my name is Bill Malloy. I'm the owner of the car wash on North Main Street.
Can you please speak up?
My name is Bill Malloy. I own the car wash on North Main Street. I wanted to speak about the proposed noise ordinance because I don't feel it adequately considers a business like ours. A car wash by its very nature is very noisy, but more importantly, it's noisy outside. It's not something where you can have in a building you can contain all the noise. I met with Josh, the town manager, last week to go over my concerns. I took a variety of decibel readings for my automatic machine, the self-serve, the vacuums, and so forth. And went over in detail with him. I gave him an exhibit. I have that if any people are interested in seeing it. But I thought what I would just do is summarize for you four or five key points so you could understand my concern. First of all of my decibel readings far exceed what the proposed ordinance is, both on the property and when you get near the boundary. It's obviously lower when you get near the boundary, but they still exceed those numbers. Secondly, as an example, just the sound of the water coming out of the high-pressure wands in the self-serve bays is anywhere from 76 to 86 decibels. Now, maybe my meters aren't exactly right. I tried 2 different ones. So, but the point is just the sound of the water. Now, why does it range? If you just squeeze the trigger and it's sitting there, it's about 76. And as the customer sprays the car, the closer they get to the metal and so forth, then the louder the noise gets. Now, that reading, when you get all closer to the end of the boundary, is lower, but it's still greater than any of the numbers that are being in the ordinance. The other point I want to make is just a car sitting in an automatic while the attendant talks to them, finds out what they want to do, and then prepares the car. The sound of the car runs anywhere from 60 to 70 decibels. The only car that comes in there that you can't hear is an electric car. But all the others, it's just sitting there idling, waiting to be waited on and to serve is 60 to 70 decibels, which again is greater than what the ordinance is talking about. The next thing I did was I measured the road noise. And I measured the road noise at the front of my building, which is 100 feet from the road. Okay? The average road noise is 60 to 70 decibels. And when the large trucks come by, it's anywhere from 70 to 95. And we have a high truck traffic on North Main Street, as you might be aware, I'm sure. So the last point I would just make is that road noise actually gave me a problem trying to get readings of my equipment and what the readings would be. Because every time I'd be reading or listening to the vacuum or listening to the car alarm, the traffic would go by, and the numbers would go sky high because of the road noise. So, I just want you to understand that, again, this is a noisy kind of operation. My equipment is relatively new in most cases. Self-serve is a good example. That's all brand new equipment. If you told me I had to replace it, get quieter equipment, I can't. That equipment is what that equipment is, and it's the sound of the water. That's what people are paying for, to get that pressure coming out of those nozzles. So, I just like you to understand that as you consider it. In my mind, I know you have goals and what you want to do to have control of noise, and I agree with all that. You just need, in my mind, take adequate consideration for businesses like this that are intentionally, not intentionally, but just by default, very noisy. And there isn't a lot to be done with it. I mean, I have equipment inside the workshop that are very, very loud, but the doors are closed, and the only people that hear that is us when we're in there. But this other noise is just there. So that's all I have to say. And like I said, I have more detail. I shared it with Josh, but I wanted you to just understand some of those very, very basic points.
Thank you.
Kenny, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Has any neighbor ever complained?
I have 3 neighbors, and I have one neighbor, well, 2 of the neighbors have given me issues for noise over time, and I try very hard to be a very good neighbor. And one of the neighbors, on occasion, will still continue to give me issues. I have signs posted, no loud music, when you go in and try and politely talk to people in their bathroom, because they turn the radio up thinking, well, they're going to hear it, but they're still not going to hear it in the bathroom. Okay? So the answer is yes. We are very aggressive in managing that, trying to be good neighbors, and for the most part, we get along. Any other questions?
I think Josh, I know, has sent something to all of us to consider tonight because of your discussion with him. So he did hear what you had to say.
Okay, good. But thank you. I just wanted to make sure you understood my concern.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Anyone else? Okay. Let's move on to the town manager's report, please.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. As usual, I'll run down my list with the major highlights from the last few weeks, 3 weeks to be specific, since we last met. And if you have any questions, I will take them at the end. So first and foremost, I did talk with a number of folks, not just about the noise ordinance, and not just with Bill, but also about the blight ordinance. I will say that all of the folks that I spoke with about the blight ordinance, they were all positive comments. They were asking, will it move forward? There weren't many specifics about what was in or what the changes were about the blight ordinance. It was really just a question of when the program was going to get moving again. And I had 2 different conversations about the noise ordinance. One was with Bill, and another one was with a resident who was wondering how quickly it would be enacted. We did have the first Conservation Commission meeting 3 weeks ago, almost 3 weeks ago at this point, and they are meeting again this Thursday at 5:00 p.m. here in Town Hall. I did go to New Hartford almost 3 weeks ago now to deliver about $600 in donations from town staff and volunteers, and that was given to the first Selectman, Dan Jerem, in the wake of the tragedy that occurred there in the center of town. Since we last met, there were 2 hurricanes or hurricane remnants that passed through the area, Henri and Ida, and we were able to weather both fairly well as things go. I know that there were individuals who certainly have seen some considerable property damage, and there were situations that arose as a result of those storms, including the high waters at Highland Lake this past weekend and so forth. And we continue to handle all of those situations as they arise and as we're able. I have gone through a number of different site visits, specifically with manufacturing companies in town. And those have been scheduled primarily by the Economic Development Commission members. They are very active, and they're doing a really great job from my perspective of making sure that they're connected and that they're listening to our business community, our manufacturing community, and trying to come up with a list of takeaways from those visits too. So they're not idle visits. They're not simply passing by. but they're really trying to brainstorm what more the town might be able to do to help promote these businesses and make sure that they stay and they're happy. General code, almost, was it 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, we had a meeting with a few of the selectmen here, as well as myself and Pam Columbi, and I'm happy to say that we are rolling along when it comes to the review of the ordinances through the general code process. If anybody is interested in seeing what has been put together so far, I encourage you, please schedule a meeting, come in, talk to me about it. I can certainly walk you through some of the recommended changes that staff has come up with that I continue to review, but you'll hear more about that at our next meeting. We did schedule, as of this morning, a meeting of the ARPA Advisory Committee, that's the American Rescue Plan Act Advisory Committee, and that was set for next Thursday, September 16th, but it was brought to my attention by Mr. Bork that there is going to be at 5 o'clock that day a meeting of the Board of Selectmen's Finance Subcommittee, and therefore we may need to reschedule for 1 week out from there, which would be the 23rd. So please stay tuned. I will be checking in to make sure that the committee members would be able to attend on the 23rd, so as to not conflict between those two meetings. Beyond that, and we do have our Director of Finance here tonight who may want to speak a little bit more about this. And actually, Bruce, I know that you have a few words to share with the selectmen if you'd like to come up while I finish up here. But I wanted to touch on grants being something that are being reviewed by our new grants manager and budget analyst. I think that we have either 3 or 4 that are currently being reviewed for submission, and all of them that we found were eligible for. They have the promise of coming with several, if not tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And she has a very good handle. That's Allison Pierce, who was hired on almost a month ago now. And she's been a great fit in Town Hall. And the last thing that I will say before I turn it over to Bruce is that I am currently in the midst of assembling the fall newsletter. It's my hope that by the end of this week that goes out to print. If anybody has items that they would like to see submitted or printed in that, please reach out, let me know, especially events for between September 15th and December 15th. I want to make sure that we're advertising those as much as we can. Thank you. And Bruce.
So I want to let you know that I have my contract with the town went to June 30th of this year. I indicated to Josh that I have other things that I need to be doing in terms of devoting time to my family and to my a leadership responsibility I have at the Hartford Temple for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So when he asked me about my plans for the future, I indicated to him that I was capable of continuing full-time as the finance director until December 31st of this year. But after that, I'm not able to commit to full-time work for the town. So I think I'll be available to assist on a part-time basis, but Josh needed to know that so that he could undertake a search for a new finance director. So he's done some legwork on that, and I think he expects to start that tomorrow. So I just wanted to say that I've been grateful for the opportunity to serve the residents of the town of Winchester and to work with the town staff. I'm very grateful for the capable assistance of the finance department staff especially. And I look at this time as being kind of a capstone on my career in finance and accounting, and I've really enjoyed being here. I hope it's been helpful for the town.
And certainly, as Bruce said, we've been working through this process really more or less since I came on board. We started those conversations about his timeline, and this certainly isn't the last time you're going to see Bruce, and I'll be in the office tomorrow and see him then. But I really do want to thank you now for helping me through the transition and for being here for the town these past several years. It has made a difference, and it's meant everything. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Before you go, I think what Josh said was an understatement. I think all of us here and people that have been around since you arrived, I can't say enough about your integrity, you know, in the position, your values around it. Not only that, but how you've like made all the accounting principles work. You've made the audits on time. You've straightened everything out from the mess that we were in to make it seem like today, if you looked at our finances, it's a normal routine best practices that you would expect to find in the town. But we all know what you started with and to where we are today, that I will always think of you as the person that had that integrity to get the work done that needed to get done to put us on sound financial footing, and you've always been so calm about it too. So just from my perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you. That does conclude my report. Are there any questions?
Anyone for Josh?
Josh, I will tell you, I want to thank you for all of the announcements that you continue to get out publicly, where we were looking at the storms and you were right on top of things. It's good to see that we're getting enough public information out there all the time. So thank you for keeping that updated.
Of course.
And that meeting for the finance versus the ARPA, I think we could maybe either go earlier with the finance meeting or just maybe flip to another day, perhaps. So you could keep going forward with the ARPA meeting, and then we'll just flip our finance. Because you have so many people on the ARPA list,
Yeah.
much more than those of us, so.
Yeah, that's a good alternative.
And we can always
Okay.
adjust our
Yeah,
schedules.
yeah. Yeah, we'll do that. Did anybody have any correspondence they wanted to highlight? Steve, boards and commissions, please.
Okay, thank you, Candy. Tonight, we have one piece of action here I'd like to put forward and recognize for consideration on the Conservation Commission, Joseph Ulevikis, for a permanent membership, a term to expire in May of 2025, and I'm putting his name up for consideration. We'll go through our process.
All right, thank you. Anyone else?
That's it.
Okay, so now we move on to some business, unfinished business from the last meeting. We have two ordinances and then the proposed letter of support that we had at that last meeting. So we'll start with the anti-blight ordinance. But before I do that, I just want to make sure that the board is comfortable with the amount of time once the red line copies got on the website. Because in the way that we do things, there's usually a 2-week period in between, and we put these things on our website. We put the change document up there, but we don't put the red line document up there. So we could either move this along, or we could hold it for another meeting so that make sure that everybody had ample time for the red line copy. But I just wanted to ask you if you were all comfortable or not. Because I don't want to get hung up on a technicality of time with anyone. So I just want to make sure we're all okay.
I'm okay with it, but probably being cautionary, it would be advantageous to table it to meet that deadline.
How long are you proposing?
To the next meeting.
Next
To the next
meeting.
Next meeting?
Yes, because that way we can talk about it a little bit tonight. That way we're definitely sure that we've had the red line copy of the 2 weeks, people can see it. And then when we get to the next one, the noise regulation, because Josh is bringing forward I think a significant update to that ordinance, that I think it would be good for us to talk about that update, whether we want to include it and then let it sit for another 2 weeks. Because I don't think there's a big rush on either one at this point. I think it's more important to get these two right and make sure that the public, because there seemed to be a bunch of interest in it, not just with Bill, but, early on when we didn't have the red line copies up, people were talking about that. So I just want to make sure that procedurally we're strong. The content will always have people that think it should be one way or the other way, but procedurally, I want to make sure we get it right. So how do you all think? Another 2 weeks for both of them? All right, so let's
Josh,
just,
I have a question. Have we gotten any feedback from anything that's online?
I have received no feedback on either of these ordinances, with the exception of what Bill shared with you just before, and with the exception of, I believe from either, I would have to go back in my email, but either 3 or 4 individuals reaching out to me to let me know that they favored the changes that were being made and they hoped that they were passed. And I know that one of those emails was already sent along to all of you directly from that individual.
I'd support the 2 weeks.
right, so in the anti-blight ordinance, is there anything anybody from the board came up with on that ordinance that we thought we should adjust, make a change with? Because most of this came from Kevin and his dealings at the court level and whatnot. So this wasn't driven by, you know, just staff, it was driven by Kevin and his experience working with it.
I have a question. How is a blighted property identified? Do we have a form or anything that someone completes?
Yes, there is a complaint form.
Okay.
And that complaint form has to be filled out by a member of the public who is not a member of the town staff.
And where is that form housed?
That form is housed in the land use office with Pam Columbi.
Oh,
at the
it's
moment.
not online, it's
To be honest, I'm not sure if it's
Okay.
online, but I know that we do have hard
land
copies
use
here.
office. Okay,
Yep.
great, thank you.
Anything else about the anti-blight, Steve?
We've recently hired a new person, and his official title is what, blight official?
He's technically holding 3 different positions right now. He's the zoning enforcement officer, the inland wetlands officer, and the blight officer. And you'll note that one of the changes that was made, or that's proposed, I should say, in this draft ordinance is a change from having it listed as the building official being the blight enforcement officer to being a blight official as named by the town manager. So that will allow us to officially make that switch. That individual has been doing the work up to this point in time, but we do need to make it de facto changed over according to the ordinance.
Okay, I just had a couple of other things. You know, my pet peeve is garbage containers left along the curb for more than pickup day.
That's right.
And as I looked through this, I was looking for, is that addressed specifically? But, you know, do we feel the blight official has enough in this to be able to go to a residence and say, you gotta take your trash containers off the curb when it's not pickup day?
Right. And I know that I did send you a little information about, I can't remember if it was an ordinance or part of the zoning regulations. I could pull that up. But we do have something on the books that directly addresses how long trash cans should or could be by a curb. And I can, like I said, I can pull that reference up in just a moment. But if you turn to page 4 of 7, under number 18, not being maintained, subsection C, under 18, is garbage, trash, litter, rubbish, or debris are situated on the premises. So certainly, it's a bit of a stretch just to say if there's a garbage can out front, that it would be considered blight under that, that definition, but it, certainly if there was trash around, visible, sticking out of, et cetera, that's a level that it would rise to blight. Otherwise, it would be covered by our other regulations.
Okay, this is a thing that I think could be tested. There are several spots around town where, you know, the trash containers are sort of visible all of the time. And the final question I have is, let's see here, the role of the Board of Selectmen, and this would be on page 5. Is this, our current procedure, I'm not aware, do we have this where we are the judges if there's a complaint that is appealed? Let's see, where is it on page 5?
That's under
Number
E,
4.
so it's E4.
Well, it's 3, 4, and 5, right at the top of the page. The town manager submits, the official submits to the town manager, and then any owner aggrieved as the result of being served with a notice may within 10 days appeal to the Board of Selectmen, and the board shall submit its decision within 10 days. Is this current practice, even though we haven't done it?
That's true, that is current practice, as according to the ordinance.
Okay, thanks.
Steve, your point about the trash cans, I don't see how they're blight, honestly. I think they are, they're not blight because they're trying to contain the garbage, but if there were garbage around, I would agree with you. But I don't see how, I think that's a zoning issue versus, I think it's a great item to include in a newsletter as a reminder.
Other towns do have specific times they have to be off the road. Like Torrington has a ordinance that says they have to.
Maybe that's another
They
ordinance
have
that
to
we
be off.
create.
I looked up another one after you brought it up. I looked up another town, they have it too, that, like after 8 PM the next day, after, if your trash gets picked up on Monday morning, then by Monday night at 8 o'clock, the trash can has to be off the road.
So just to make sure everybody's aware, in our zoning regulations, it's section 3, subsection E11, under common regulations, there's a part that reads, individual refuse/recycling facilities shall be stored behind the dwelling unit. Refuse/recycling containers shall not be placed at curb more than 24 hours in advance of scheduled date. Furthermore, collection of containers shall be removed within 24 hours of 6 a.m. of the scheduled collection date. So from my perspective, that would be a zoning enforcement, and of course, that's handled by one person now, so similar mechanisms. But it would be redundant to place it under blight as well as
Right,
zoning.
I don't think it's blight.
I'm fine with that.
I have a question. On the original ordinance, there were steps that when you had to file a complaint, I don't see it in here. You had to send a certified letter to the, I think, town clerk and the building inspector. I'm wondering, should there not be ways to, the steps to file a complaint in the ordinance?
I'm sorry, I'm not as familiar with the original ordinance as you are, so I'm having trouble recalling what the steps are that, or the way in which those steps were listed as you're describing. But the ordinance, as you're seeing it in your packet, is the redlined version. So anything that was there, unless it's been lined through, remains, and therefore it remains the same as it was.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a section that outlines very specific steps, but there hasn't been before now if it's not listed within.
Okay.
I'll take just a minute to peruse and
So
let you know what I
if
see.
the steps aren't in there, should they be in there? I guess that's the question. Or is
There is something, and if you look under penalties, but I don't know,
or is it an administrative?
if you go to 2.3 penalties, if a violation remains unabated after 7 days.
No, it tells you how.
It's before.
specific how to file a complaint. I don't have the ordinance with me, I usually carry it.
Well, it should be on the red line copy.
Right.
Are you sure that was part of the ordinance, or was that a auxiliary document that had been created
There
to?
was section 180 anti-blight ordinance.
What's the number of that?
180.
180.
No, that's the ordinance.
That's
That
what-
is the
That's what
ordinance,
we're
yeah.
talking
Oh,
about.
I thought you were pointing to one here. It says, for section 4, it says citation or written statement of the relevant.
No, no. Find it, Candy?
I'm getting there. Section 179 is long.
That's what I just noticed.
Okay, so it says what the declaration of policy is, the declaration of purposes, the definitions, deterioration, dilapidated, garbage, prohibiting the creation or maintaining of blighted premises, enforcement. That anybody may file in writing a complaint of violation to the chief building official.
Right.
It's under
If the
E,
chief
enforcement.
building official has reason to believe the owner violated the provision, the chief building official shall serve
Serve
notice
yeah.
of violation, and in order to
It's all
correct the
there.
violation, shall require the owner to comply with the requirements within 14 days. Copy of the order shall be filed with the town clerk, and any subsequent purchaser of the property shall be subject to such order. So it gets filed on the deed. Chief building official shall submit to the town manager a monthly report listing the violations served in the previous month. Any owner who is aggrieved as a result of being served with notice may, within 10 days, receipt of the notice appeal for revocation of the notice to the Board of Selectmen. Board shall submit its decision to the chief building officer official within 10 days of the hearing, and order to correct issue by the building official. So those are all the steps.
And those are outlined here in the red line as well.
Right.
So that is under subsection E.
So the last time this was updated was 2012. So a lot has happened in court since then, so. Is there anything anybody wants changed on it that's currently there now? Anything that want adjusting? Because otherwise it'll sit for another 2 weeks, and then when it comes back, we're gonna move it forward again. Or keep it moving after that point. Okay then, so let's move on to the noise regulation, which might be a little bit more, more questions on that. And so Josh, you want to start with your suggestion you gave him?
Sure. So, well, there are a couple things that I want to touch on that all relate to this. But I did speak with Bill this past week and heard from him that he has concerns about businesses. And I don't think that this just pertains to his business. There are other businesses certainly that create a level of noise that exists in the community and have existed there for decades. And those entities, as the ordinance stands, if there was no edits made to the proposed document that you saw last time, there is a process that those businesses can go through to receive a variance. However, that variance is granted by the chief of police, and if you were all to move to adopt this ordinance today, Bill would be put in a position where he has to be at the mercy of the chief of police to not just act in his favor, but also act quickly. And that's not something that I think is reasonable to a reasonable burden to place on businesses. So after having that conversation, there are a few different options I think that you could consider in order, if you are of a mind to make some alterations to accommodate for businesses like Bill's. The first I provided you earlier in an email, and provided a hard copy at your seat tonight, and that would be to add a subsection D under 270-9, and it could read something to the effect of, all registered businesses legally operating within the town of Winchester at the time of the ordinance adoption shall automatically be granted a variance for noise-emitting equipment and machinery they possess that is necessary for the operation of that business at the time that the ordinance is originally adopted. Any change in size, quantity, or use of said equipment or machinery, or any change in the business's location shall require that business to apply for a separate variance as outlined in 270-9A. That's one option if you're looking to grandfather in businesses and make sure that they have something to work off of. If you wanted to explore other options, I think you have really three other choices. The first is to do nothing and to allow the variance process to run its course as it was originally presented. The second would be to adjust the phrasing of the ordinance to allow for the times to be set as such that it wouldn't conflict with any such businesses' working hours. And third, and sorry, I don't have this written down, but third would be to change the decibel level. I will say that the decibels that are presented in the ordinance itself are pretty standard across the state. I did quite a bit of research to make sure that we weren't asking for anything that was totally out of line with what other towns are asking for. And actually, the very specific decibels that we landed on were the ones that were recommended to us by Kevin Nelligan, our town attorney. But those are really the including what's in front of what I gave to you in this one sheeter. Those are the four options that are available to you, whether you would want to take action on this item or perhaps not.
So the process, obviously, for us is if we're gonna make any adjustments, we can make them tonight. We could ask Josh to write them into the ordinance if we like what he wrote here. And then that way he would put it up on the website so that it would be published, you know, as of, like we did 3 weeks ago with the first draft of it. Or if we need more research into it for the businesses, then we would start, in 2 weeks, we would start out, you know, at the step that we're currently at with the changes again, and not move it as quickly as the next time.
Would we need Kevin to look over this section D?
He has already.
He has.
Yeah, we spoke about it. I said it to him last week, and we spoke about it this morning.
One of the things I asked Josh before about grandfathering is, grandfathering works if you know what came before. I've watched a lot of things with grandfathering become questions of, well, what is grandfathering? Is grandfathering because I own that property, or is grandfathering run with the property? It doesn't matter who owns the property. Does it run with, you know, this particular type of issue, or doesn't it? And so grandfathering sometimes gets a little, itself, the word grandfathering gets a little dicey. So do we need that defined? How do we figure out which ones are grandfathered? How do we know that? Obviously, we had one person come forward, so we're well aware of that one, but what about other ones that are around? I think most people just don't want noise in the middle of the night when they're sleeping, right? Or trying to get ready for putting kids to bed, or you know, getting ready for work the next morning. So I think a lot of things that occur during the day, I think most of us just kind of, you know, write off as, you know, business work. But like that time we had the, in the neighborhood when the garbage pickup was like at 3 or 4 in the morning, you know, and then Bob had called about, you know, called the company on that. Hey, could you pick up from the school a little bit later? So I think those kind of noises are the ones that bother people a lot, is when it's later in the day. So we obviously have to make sure the businesses can run, because that has to happen. So is this the language we want?
Well, this came from Kevin Nelligan, so we can't turn it back to him and say, you know, do it differently.
I mean, we could by not grandfathering things. This is specific language, the grandfather, and Josh gave us, what, 2 or 3 other.
Right, so, and just to reiterate, to make sure that everybody has them in their head, the first other option that you have at your disposal would be to adjust the times. Right now, this noise ordinance as it's presented covers 24 hours. That's considerable, it's ambitious, but we could adjust the ordinance to only cover the hours between, and I'm just throwing out, you know, random times here, 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. So that way, businesses that are operating during your normal 8 a.m. to 5 or 6 p.m. time frame have the opportunity, and even our businesses a little later into the evening have an opportunity to make the noise they need throughout the normal course of business and move forward from there. So you could adjust it so that the time is only relevant during those evening hours. A second thing you could do would be to change the decibel levels to be higher. I will say that even if you raised all of those by 10 decibels, which is considerable, that wouldn't still cover, in Bill's case, the noise that's being emitted from his business right now, as per the measurements that he took. And beyond that, the last option, I suppose, would be you could add car washes in the case of Bill or whatever other businesses come forward to a list of exclusions and exemptions. Personally, I have experience working through that in Waterford. For example, I don't know how many of you have been down to the Speed Bowl in Waterford, but there was a lot of discussion about the fact that that Speed Bowl was able to run until any time they wanted, usually 2 or 3 in the morning, without any issue, because they were totally exempted from their noise ordinance in Waterford. And I know that can run into similar issues with grandfathering has. Now, on the subject of grandfathering, I've been giving this some thought. With the text as it's presented, it would be pretty easy to say, did a certain business exist at the time of the adoption? So I think that that's a part of this clause that is fairly easily enforced. However, the change in size, quantity, or use of equipment or machinery inside, that's pretty hard to manage. We're not doing such regular inspections in a lot of these places that we would have a detailed and intimate knowledge of the equipment and machinery they're using now. Certainly something we could do is say that any equipment or machinery that has been purchased in the year 2022 and beyond is obviously new, and is obviously something that is not grandfathered by this clause. But it is, to be perfectly honest with all of you, it would be very difficult to enforce.
I guess we could say that we definitely want something to be done to help the businesses, right?
Definitely.
We all
'Cause
want
if you're a
some.
current business, that you
So
should.
the current businesses, we definitely want that kind of, some sort of language there.
I'm okay with this section D, grandfather, with the possible exception of adding a change of ownership as well, needing to request a new variance.
Because the people that own the business could always ask for the variance under the policy, right?
It's just like a 490. So it's only in existence for the property that you have, and if you sell your property, you have to reapply. And if it was grandfathered in, and I would think planning and zoning, even though they had to appeal again, would allow it because there's no change to the business. But if they were to, as Todd said, try and expand the business with a new owner, then that could cause an issue with more equipment, and then would be more of a residential problem. And other than that, then they should relocate to an area where there aren't, it's non-residential. So I agree. If there's a change to the, expanded or whatever, small lot.
All right, so, if Josh takes this paragraph and puts some additional language in there, and then puts it into the ordinance online and sends it to us, then at the next meeting, we can either move it along or continue to tweak it. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
I am intrigued by the idea of hours. You wouldn't expect a business to be making noises, you're not washing your cars at 11:30 at night.
You are there.
There, you are there.
But you're not using the automated equipment, you're using the hoses. It's a 24-hour operation. But you could vacuum 24 hours. So there, I don't know what the complaints have been in terms of the use of vacuums versus,
But there's also other businesses that, if they're running shifts and things are good, then they'll run 3 shifts. So it's possible for things to run 24 hours. in some businesses. Those might all be up in the industrial park, but there
We'd
is
hope they would be running 3 shifts.
But, there's one up by the lake, they're a factory up there.
Dinter.
I have never heard of, like, the noise issue or anything, but they're in different parts and stuff, so, different places, but they can run 24.
I think the time would be good to include, some people have worked 3 shifts, so if they're, there might be that I don't know what the sound of the vacuums are on the lot compared to the equipment. I don't know what the issue is.
There was a section in here that said something about noise. I'd have to find it again. Time, I forgot where it was in the ordinance.
There definitely were times in the ordinance.
The word time, nighttime was there.
Yep. Daytime hours and nighttime hours are defined, and there's a difference in the proposed ordinance
Different zones.
for residential areas. There's a difference between the maximum allowable decibels that are being received into.
Different zones have different times.
That's right. And if anybody is it's not just one change necessarily that can happen. If individuals wanted other changes throughout this ordinance, certainly, I suppose now's the time.
So just as a clarification of the wording here, Josh,
Yep.
2 words, all registered businesses legally operating. So businesses that aren't registered or legally operating don't abide by this. They could be, this doesn't apply.
That's correct. So if a business is operating, for example, without a certificate of occupancy, we would not allow them to abide by this clause, and they would not be granted an variance. It's another mechanism for the town to be able to have just a level of weight over businesses to make sure that everybody's in compliance, everybody's remaining safe and going through the normal legal structures that they need to operate successfully.
Well, I'm in favor of what Kevin's suggesting with the additional wording of ownership. Is that what you're suggesting, Katie? The additional phrase
Change in
of
ownership.
Change of
any
ownership.
change in ownership?
Yeah,
Just put any change ownership in size, quantity, or use of said equipment. You just add that word in the last sentence.
Yep.
so as far as process goes, Josh has to put it into the current language of ordinance as a change, post it online, give it to us for the next meeting.
I'm in favor of that.
Okay?
Okay, you got it.
Okay, so the next item is, it's a letter of support for the Winchester Land Trust. Josh, how do you want to do this? Do you want to?
Certainly, we have a couple members of the land trust who could speak for just a moment or so.
It's not for us to do anything except support your application for grant, correct? Yes? Do you just
Hi.
want to show us the map?
Sure. Jen Perga and Louise Van Alstyne from the Winchester Land Trust. So there, sorry we weren't here last time to answer questions, but we're here now. And so Louise is my helper here. These maps, by the way, they're going to be part of the POCD, and they're going to be available to people, and hopefully we can get them on the town website. But this one in particular shows the open space in Winchester. And so the Winchester Land Trust already owns this large parcel. It's like 170 acres, I believe, plus 2 additional parcels. And the light green is the land that's protecting the drinking water resources. And so the parcel that we're trying to buy is right here. And so it abuts land that the land trust already owns. So it's expanding open space, but it's also expanding the land that's protected for our drinking water resources. So it's kind of in an ideal spot, and it's 60 acres, and the owner is selling it at a very reasonable price. And so we're writing this grant to the state open space fund. And so it usually is like a 2-year process. And so we're hoping to get maybe 60 to 70% of the price from the grant from the state to get us started.
Based upon what I saw on the map, that is not a landlocked piece. It has access on 2 roads, is that correct?
So it has access on Rugbrook Road and then the old Waterway Turnpike, which I don't know if I'd consider that access because it's pretty rough.
Not in wet times you would consider it.
No, correct, and it's a dirt road can get pretty rutted with these storms.
And it's all wooded.
It is,
There's no structure on this property.
correct.
So this is, we're not giving any money or anything toward it, just a letter of support that we would support the land trust getting this land. It supports our drinking water. If we all looked at the rain that we've had this past couple weeks, filtering our drinking water and filtering any water is good, and the only way water gets filtered is through forest land.
The other good thing about this property is it hasn't been logged for decades, and it's been owned by a family of naturalists, and they've kept data on all of the birds and other wildlife that's on the property and trees. And so it gives us like a lot of information, and so
Wonderful inventory.
we're thinking that the deep is gonna look favorably on the application.
So I would need a motion to allow us, Jack?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. I recommend, move the Board of Selectmen grant approval for the letter of support to be given to the Winchester Land Trust for the purchase of the 60 acres of land. Should we call it that particular land, or just 60 acres of land?
Yeah, that particular one.
Do you want to think of a name? What we call
Do we need to put the name on that?
Yeah.
Roskin property?
Second. Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Again, this is just a letter of support.
Who's the
Well-
letter from? Is it signed by all of us, or just?
No, just by me and, probably by me as, or Josh, me and Josh, I don't know. If you want to sign it.
Good.
The draft of the record, of the letter you have in the package, is that pretty much the way?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you seen the proposed letter?
Yes.
Very good.
Okay, I'll take a vote now. All in favor? Unanimous, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for protecting the land.
All right, so now we're moving on to a couple new things that we haven't seen before that Josh is gonna talk to us about. On Platte Hill Road, as you all know, on Platte Hill Road, there was a proposed subdivision some number of years ago. That subdivision ceased to exist, and now that is where they are looking to put the solar farm, solar generating complex up there. So Josh?
Yes, thank you, Candy. I'm sorry, are you Kurt by any chance? If you wouldn't mind coming up to the front, there may be questions from the board and honestly from myself too, as we go through this. So there are 2 different items that are on the agenda related to Platte Hill. We're beginning with the easement release at the former subdivision site. And my understanding of this is that back in 2006, and there are minutes from meetings that are attached and in your packet for your review. My understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, Kurt, is that in 2006, the town of Winchester went ahead and approved this subdivision, and as a result of that, required that certain easements be granted to the town. One of those is a conservation easement dated August 17th, 2006, and one of them is a drainage easement dated August 17th, 2006. At this point in time, the Planning and Zoning Commission, this was just back in August, on August 9th, 2021, so less than a month ago, the Planning and Zoning Commission acknowledged that the subdivision approval at that site has expired. And therefore, you know, from a certain perspective, there's no need for any of those easements to be held by the town anymore. And certainly from the perspective of this site being developed for this solar site, it's my understanding that you're seeking the town to release those easements so that it's a clear parcel.
Yeah, the easements and then in the bond.
And we'll get to that one next.
Okay, yeah.
We'll take it one step at a time.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. So there is no need for us to hold these easements anymore. At this point in time, there is no such subdivision for them to be applied to. And through the Planning and Zoning Commission has already gone through the 824 process and deemed the easements be released from the property and recommends that the Board of Selectmen moves forward with the release of those easements, which does require us to go to a special town meeting. And I've gone through, both with Candy and with Kevin Nelligan, the requirements for our release of any easement or the sale of any land. And it requires that the special town meeting for the release of said easement be held not less than 30 days and not more than 45 days following the board's action on this item, which would place it squarely, or one of the many options that you have, I suppose, before our meeting on Monday, October 18th, 2021. So again, that falls into that 30 to 45 day window. And if the board is amenable to this, you could move to have this item placed on a special meeting, a special town meeting agenda that would be held in conjunction with the Board of Selectmen meeting on October 18th. And Kurt, if there's any other information that you want to add onto that, please.
Writing the date down.
No
No, that was
problem.
great. Nothing to add.
Okay.
All right, so is everybody clear on all this? Any questions?
I'm kind of, why was this just identified now and not all along for the months and months? But it's not for, you know, past groups. I'm surprised that this is coming up now and was not addressed earlier. But I don't know when that process occurs, like when easements are identified, when we're giving property to another organization. I'm
You
just
mean
gonna-
like why when they were talking about the solar, putting the
Yeah.
solar site up there, why they didn't identify the easement
Right.
through planning and zoning back then?
Right.
I guess that would be a question.
Yeah,
for you
this
guys.
was off, this isn't on the solar property. This is, these were lots that were separate, sort of along the road, and to do with well, we'll talk about the bond, but the solar is gonna be kind of in the center, and these three lots that these are tied to are in like the northeast of the property. So as we were going through our permitting, well, we really didn't have to address them with the siting council as part of our permitting, but when we go through our financing and we go through a complicated financing process, we go through the title with a fine tooth comb.
Title search and everything.
So we
right.
found like 17, we were under the theory, the practical land use people like me were under the theory the subdivision is gone, therefore everything sort of disappears with
Right.
it. But when you get into the details, there were like 17 different easements and drainage things that we had to just clear off title. So it's just kind of cleanup work we're doing right now.
So are these three parcels part of the solar project, or are they gonna be separate?
They're separate, yeah. Most of the solar's only about, I think the footprint of the actual array is only about 10 acres of the 100-acre property.
No, but these aren't gonna be part of the whole thing, right?
No,
These are
no.
things that you guys are keeping, not giving to the land trust, if I remember correctly? Are these parcels on the road?
No, one of them we're gonna give, and the other one I've gotta kind of wait, but will probably be donated, and it's confusing in a few years. But the parcel one, which is the most northeastern parcel, is that's on the table. We're gonna donate that too. I mean, I have zero intentions of doing anything up there but the solar and donating land. I mean, that's just, I've never flipped a house in my life.
Thank you for the clarification.
I'll have the motion.
Yep.
You want me to read it?
Yep.
I move that the Board of Selectmen approve the scheduling of a special town meeting to be held in conjunction with a regular Board of Selectmen meeting on Monday, October 18, 2021, to authorize the release of the declaration and grant of conservation easement held by the town of Winchester on file at volume 366, page 1124 of the Winchester Land Records, and the release of the drainage easement held by the town of Winchester on file at volume 166, page 1144 of the Winchester Land Records, and convey such interest back to Platte Hill Land, LLC.
Thank you, Linda, for the second. Any other questions by anyone? All in favor? Okay, unanimous, thank you. Item D.
And the second item up for discussion tonight is the release of a surety bond. Now, this is another item that was required by the town at the time that the subdivision was granted. My understanding, just for everybody's clarification, is that while the town did require a surety bond at that time, there was no actual amount of money that was ever given in the name of this bond from the applicant to the town, and thus there's an obligation that's outstanding right now from the parcel holder to the town, but there is no actual amount of money that we will be releasing as a part of the release of this surety bond. However, there is an obligation on the table. My understanding is that the Planning and Zoning Commission at their August 9th, 2021 meeting did vote to release that surety bond agreement on file as listed. However, just to make sure that all T's are crossed and all I's are dotted, and given that there was some confusion as to whether the Planning and Zoning Commission has the authority to release this bond or the Board of Selectmen has the authority to release it, the applicant is asking that both the Board of Selectmen and the Planning and Zoning Commission vote to release this surety bond. And this is step 2 of that process. Planning and Zoning has already given their motion to release and approved it.
And that approval does not have to go before town meeting.
It does not. Your vote now would decide it.
But again, there's no money involved. It's just kind of a technicality in terms of a concept of what would have needed to be taken from the developer had they moved forward with the subdivision, but they never did. So there is no money. It's just a language item. So somebody wants to make that motion? Linda?
I move that the Board of Selectmen approve the request of Platte Hill Land LLC to release the surety bond agreement on file at volume 366, page 1157 of the Winchester Land Records, and authorize zoning agent Pam Columby to implement said release and note such release in the Winchester Land Records.
I'll second it.
Any other questions on that? All in favor? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next up, Josh has some proposed line item transfers.
And Bruce, I don't know if you want to come and speak to the proposed transfer as well as possibly refunds as recommended by the Collector of Revenue. But this is an intra-departmental transfer that's been proposed. I can let you take care of the fine details, Bruce, in the assessor line.
Right, in the assessor's department, they're just asking to move $750 in budget dollars from the training and education line, 811, to the membership dues and subscriptions line, 814. And they had a need to have the money in the membership dues and subscriptions account rather than the training account. And their training needs are not as great as they had budgeted them for. Our new assessor did take 2 courses in June, when normally she had expected to just take 1, but so she's doesn't need to take that second course during this fiscal year. So I'm comfortable with the reason for the transfer request, and that it will not affect the overall assessor budget.
Is there a motion to approve the transfer?
I move that the Board of Selectmen approve the line item transfers from the Assessor Department of $750, Training and Education 115-811-0000, to the Assessor Department $750 for membership, dues, and subscriptions 115-814-0000.
Second, please. Thank you, Melissa. Any questions? All in favor? Unanimous, thank you. And then our always refunds as recommended by Collector of Revenues.
So the Collector of Revenues is asking for authority to refund a total of $5,385.60. $692.34 of that total has to do with certificates of correction related to motor vehicles. And the balance, $4,693.26, is comprised of two different accounts where they received a duplicate payment on the taxes.
I have a motion to refund this. Melissa?
I move that the Board of Selectmen authorize the refunds recommended by the Collector of Revenue in the amount of $5,385.60.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Josh. Any questions? All in favor? Okay, unanimous, thank you. And then the last item is the authorization for the acceptance of grant money for the housing study, I believe, Josh?
Yes, so I know that I shared this exciting news with all of you through one of my emailed updates. But we do have, so first and foremost, we did receive, or we've been notified by the state government that we are eligible to receive $14,900 for the Affordable Housing Plan Technical Assistance Grant, which was being offered by the State of Connecticut Department of Housing. And so I'm very excited about that. In order to truly accept the money, however, they need us to, or this body, to adopt a resolution, which is included in the second page of this section of your packet. Very short and simple. Identifying that you give your support for the receiving of this grant money and its use as defined by the state.
May I have a motion? Steve?
I move that the Board of Selectmen adopt resolution number 21-18, supporting the authorization of the town manager to sign documents for the Affordable Housing Plan Technical Grant money awarded to the town of Winchester.
There's a second, please. Thank you, Candace.
I have a question, Josh. How's that money used? What does, in this particular case, $14,000 of grant money, who uses it and how is it used? And who?
Right, so the Council of Governments in our corner of the state has decided that they are going to offer out an opportunity to all of the towns who take part in this grant program, where they're bringing on some help and support, and the grant money that we give to them will go to, and they will have individuals within the COG system, their employees, take on the bulk of the work to actually write up a housing plan for our town. So we're going to be using essentially the Council of Governments as a consultant in this case. I believe about $13,000 of the $14,900 will go to them as a contractor for the writing of this plan. And through that, they are going to need an extra level of support. So they're going to need some public outreach because the plan does require us to engage with citizens both in a direct manner and through surveys. And so the other money on top of the $13,000 will go towards supporting that, towards supporting in-person endeavors and conversations with residents and so forth. I did in the last packet, I apologize, I didn't include this again, but when this was last discussed, I should say, there was an outline of where that money was going, and I can certainly send that back to you if you're interested in taking a closer look.
Very good.
Anyone else? If not, all in favor? Unanimous, thank you. Brings us to citizens' comments. If anyone would like to speak for this round, John?
Good evening, John Leonard, 16 Superior Street. On your noise ordinance, I'm not sure if everybody's checked around, but there's a company that moved into an area. Its address is on Rockwell Street, I believe. But anyway, they came from another part of town. And they'll wake you up in the morning, backing up their trucks, payloaders, bulldozers, whatever they want, and whatever they have in that yard. And it can be noisy, and it can be noisy at 2 o'clock in the morning when they're out plowing and everything else, and they're pulling in with the payloader and loading up the dump trucks again. So it does get noisy up there. Now, I don't know why anybody else hasn't complained. I'm on the other side of the street, and I can hear it in the morning. I don't know about the 7 or 8, 9 houses, whatever's around there, but they gotta be hearing it, because I can hear it. And I'm not totally deaf yet. But anyway, I would just, before you get that in paperwork on the grandfather, because they only moved from 4 miles from the other part of Winchester into that location. And that company before that never made any noise hardly. You never heard anything running around there during the daytime. So I just want to let you know that. Thank you.
Have you filed a complaint?
Huh?
Have you filed a complaint before?
No, I never have, because I'm 200 feet from that property. I wonder why nobody else has filed a complaint. Maybe they have, and I don't know. Thank you.
Bill?
I just wanted to follow up on a couple of quick points based on the discussion that I heard. I'm hoping that you are gonna pursue the grandfathering approach, because I think it's a more reasonable way to pursue it, with some of the stipulations you talked about. But if you were to decide to do anything about restriction based on hours, I just wanted you to understand a little bit the impact at least it would have on me. I can't speak to other businesses, okay? We are a 24-hour operation. They're surprisingly, over the years, our night business has increased, and I think it has a lot to do with how busy people are during the day, and so when people get out of work, they come in. If you were to impose an hours restriction on it, it would put me at a very significant disadvantage to my competitors. You say there's no car washes in town. That's true, but my competitors are Torrington. They don't view me as a competitor, but they are a big competitor to me, because everybody goes to Torrington for the big box stores. And I know when they come to the automatic, I could see they have their punch card or whatever, so I'm very aware of it. Plus, I ran a car wash in Torrington for 27 years, so I'm very familiar with the area. And I actually live in Torrington. And it is more expensive to operate in Winston than Torrington, and this would just add to that. And you might wonder why that is, but our water costs in winter in Torrington are significantly greater than Torrington. I presented that to the board back a few years ago when they were raising the water rates, and I showed them how much cheaper it is to operate in Torrington versus Winston. But be as it may, I just don't need one more added difficulty in terms of competing with them. And then finally, I was asked by the gentleman in terms of the complaints, and I was thinking about that some more and listening to the conversation. In the 31 years I've been there in that business, I've never had any late night complaints. My complaints have been during the daytime, early daytime, and early evening, but never the late night. Because usually that kind of customers, they come in, they're doing their business, and they're leaving. They're not going to be dilly-dallying around and so forth. So I just want you to be aware of all that as you make considerations. Okay? I realize you're going to make whatever decisions you're going to make, but I want you to have as much information as possible. Okay? Thank you. By the way, thank you very much for even the opportunity to talk. I mean, I live in a different town, but I've been done businesses down my whole life. And I mentioned to Josh after he had his orientation, when he came to the meet and greet, and I sat there and I listened to all the people complain, and I think Josh may remember, I raised my hand and said, you know, some of these things may be true, but at least you can come here and you can talk about it, because a lot of times you can't do that. And I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
The businesses do also, further to that, the other business has specific hours as well. So he has existing hours that are grandfathered, so does the other business. So, you know, they can, if they're grandfathered in around those existing times, and if they're not, you know, the other business isn't, you know, is going beyond those times, then there's, you know, I think our ordinance is 7 a.m. to 10, so it would still work. if the grandfather, if these two businesses have their own hours, it still should work. My opinion.
Yeah, in a perfect world.
Yeah.
Okay, so no more citizens. Any selectmen's comments and reports? Todd?
I've got a couple of quick things. One, we're 4 days from the 20th anniversary of September 11th. If you've started to forget what September 11th was, it might be advantageous to go to YouTube and look at some of the newscasts from September 11th, especially out of New York. It's the New York channels. ABC 7 out of New York had a lot of coverage that day. The second thing deals a little bit with history, and since we're in Winchester's 250, the birthday or anniversary, whatever you want to call it, I just had a little something to deal with Winstead's history. We have a long, colorful, and storied past in Winchester. We are rich in tales of the Witch of Winchester, the stories of Selectman Riley Smith and the Winstead Wild Man. Who was it? What was it? Was it a real Bigfoot, an escaped swamp ape from a traveling circus? Was it a famous, wealthy artist who escaped twice from an asylum in Litchfield? Or was it the local hermit curmudgeon, Mortimer Pond? Things we'll never know, but we can talk for hours about the colorful history that we have. Sadly, stories end, failing to be passed on from generation to generation. Memories fade and the old storytellers pass on. This brings me to my point. We have a long forgotten cemetery in town, the Danbury Quarter Cemetery. It's basically been abandoned by the town. Among those that are laid to rest there are Captain Abraham Andrews, Captain Timothy Benedict, and Reuben Tucker, all of the American Revolutionary War. Also laid to rest there are Charles Gilbert of the 7th Connecticut Volunteers, killed in the Civil War in 1862. George and Wilbert Hurlbut of the 2nd Regiment Heavy Artillery, Connecticut Volunteers, both killed in combat during separate battles in 1863. And James Tuttle of the Company I, 5th Regiment of the Connecticut Volunteers, who died after the war in 1866. Through the years, since it's been abandoned, it's been vandalized, and it doesn't see much traffic anymore, except for the few scant partiers who bravely wander in. I would like permission to explore the possibility of having the cemetery added to the Directory of Historic Places for the state of Connecticut, examining the possibilities of it being declared a historic site with the protections afforded to a historic site, as well as exploring the possibility of grants to reclaim, clean up, and protect the property. I'm more than willing to spearhead this effort and do most of the legwork if the board is willing to allow me to proceed. And I have a list of the dead that are in the cemetery. It's not very big, but looks like the last person buried there was 1934.
Is this a private cemetery or something that we own? Who owns the land?
That's one of the issues, because it's in the middle of nowhere pretty much, and that would be one of the things that I would need to look in the records office on who actually owns it. I believe that it is Winchester's property, but like I said, it's been abandoned, so nobody takes care of it.
I remember a long time ago this came up.
In 2015,
and
Daughters
some-
of the American Revolution did a
So
cleanup
people
up
went up
there.
and cleaned up.
Yeah. But I believe that was the last time anyone's cleaned it.
Well, I would recommend if you go down there to, talk with, like Deb Kessler, Lynn Kessler, Virginia, other people at Genealogy to help with the historic designation, because they've done that before.
Yep. I've got some of that paperwork.
And
listed
also
property at
Jimmy.
the National Registry.
and also Jim Rollins, because he just got the waterworks
Right.
registered. And then I guess we'd meet with Josh, because then there becomes the costs at our cemeteries anyway
You're right.
to upkeep.
There are, looking through some of the stuff, there are several grants for national historic cemeteries that are available.
The state has one too that that towns can apply for historic cemeteries.
Yes.
I think it's only like $1,500, I think. Wasn't very much.
Todd, another source for you, Verda Gilson. And she's the
Genealogy.
head of genealogy at the library. She can maybe sort some of that history out for you.
Thank you for bringing this forward. I've lived here my whole life, and I never knew there was a Danbury cemetery.
It's tiny.
Every quarter,
Danbury Quarter.
You have to go down a long dirt road to see it.
You can't drive to it.
All right, is there anyone else with anything? Steve,
Move we adjourn.
second, please.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?